Jason Papalio, today's guest, and we are talking about the holistic approach to athletic recovery, things that kids hate and professional athletes learn to embrace, the non-sexy stuff.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Geoff Rottmayer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I'm Geoff Rottmayer, and today I'm sitting down with Jason Papalio, and he's an athletic recovery specialist. Jason, how are you, sir?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm doing great, man. Listen, you're a guy who spent a lot of time in the field of athletic recovery, and that's what I want to talk about today. But let's just kind of start with your background in sports and how you came to becoming an athletic recovery specialist that you are today.
Yeah, I've been working with a lot of teams and athletes over the last several years. It's a lot of mobility, yoga, stability and balance work that is so sort of underappreciated. They love to do all the work with the weights or any of the heavy lifting, but it's a challenge for them to work on joint range of motion or working on the mobility or flexibility, because it's just not the sexy thing. If you tell somebody to go foam roll for 20 minutes, they'll look at you with two heads. Right. So it's been a good process. It's taken time where I've built it out, where I work with private clients or work with some teams, whether it's some elite high school teams, some college teams, and some pro athletes over the years. And it's just building over the years and working with the clients and building great relationships with the coaches, the strength coaches, the athletic trainers, and all the different connections along the way.
Very nice. And when you say recovery, with the mobility and stability and all that stuff, can you talk a little bit about why that stuff is important? Recovery, the term that kind of get tossed around all the time, but I think a lot of people don't really understand why it's important, because it's not the sexy stuff. But it's important. So can you talk a little bit about why it's important?
Yeah, completely understood. Yeah, it's definitely a term that's thrown out there. Sometimes recovery could just be getting a good night's sleep. Sometimes getting 6-8 hours, getting quality sleep that sometimes they don't get. I mean, it depends on if it's athletes that's traveling a lot. If you're traveling across different time zones, that could be one thing. Doing a lower activity, lower modality of activity like yoga or some type of mobility work that you're working on flexibility and mobility or pliability in the joints, that just give them a time to get their nervous system back to kind of equilibrium and slow back down instead of staying at this very high pitch. So if they just stay high over time, there's a greater chance of injury. If you were to kind of bring it back to equilibrium, you could have these good ebbs and flows versus just staying at a kind of critical state or just higher state where injuries are more common or so at that pace, just because you're staying at such a high pace. So the load could be a game, could be practices, and it just adds up cumulative over a season or over a year, depending on how much training they're doing throughout, and you're just adding on top of it.
Very nice. And how do you choose, what protocol one uses, So how do you choose this guy needs X, Y, Z, and that guy needs this?
Yeah, I mean, it varies if it's a team, and it's a basketball team, a baseball team. Basketball team, it's a lot of jumping, pounding. So for them, they're going to need a lot of kind of work on their feet, a lot on their hips. Baseball team, per se, a lot of rotation, so thoracic spine rotation. So it varies in that sense, where for a large group, depends on if I'm working with them the first time or multiple times, then I kind of put them through a few different movements or exercises to see where they are, sort of, so I get a baseline. And then I would sort of build out a program for them. So the first time is more of like an assessment. Yep. Where I'm assessing what their specific needs are. Now, if I'm working with an individual program, it could be just like building out a strength program or a conditioning program. And we would do different baselines, like an FMS test per se, where you could check what their range of motion is, what their mobility is. Whereas if it's a larger team, I can't spend the hours it would take to assess each individual person versus I get 45 minutes an hour. So maybe I'll talk to the strength coach or I'll talk to the athletic trainer. What are the specific needs? Maybe try to go to a few other games, see what their movements are. And then when I put them through some baseline things, it'll give me a sense of where they're tight or kind of what the need is. And then I could build it out from there. It's usually a lot of hip stuff just in general.
Yeah.
Men or even women get really tight in their hips based on their movement, because the more load you're adding on, the more stress you're putting on. And they just don't really have good range of motion or good control there. And that causes, like if they have knee pain, it could be their hips tight or their ankles tight. So it's not always where the specific pain is. Sometimes it's usually the joint above or below it.
Yeah, very, very nice. And whenever you say you would watch a guy in a game, what are the things that you would be able to see? Because it's interesting that one can, go watch a game and see that that this player has hip issues or, tight hamstrings or whatever it is, So is there a checklist of things that you look for? So first I look at this and then I look at this. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I agree. It's sometimes it is like a checklist where you're looking at X, Y, Z. All right, if it's a basketball player, I want to see are they jumping? Are they landing pretty well? Are their knees tracking in? If it's a taller athlete, their hip bone's higher, so usually it's just they have less range of motion just because they're taller. And then it involves more pounding. So it depends on kind of the size of the athlete. Are they tall and skinny? Are they big and muscular? Kind of just looking at that first. And then when they're playing a sport, say baseball, when they're swinging, are they rotating pretty well? Are they cringing? Does it seem like they're kind of tight there? Can I get a sense of, all right, maybe here's the maximal range and maybe they've only got halfway. So it's sort of a good eye test. And I'm looking at just on their sport needs. So basketball is running, jumping, right? Baseball is a lot of throwing, rotation. It could be a lot of shoulder stuff. And then also with the athletes, it could be asking them so we can get a feel of what's bothering them.
Yeah.
And then it's not just a program that I say is going to work well for them. Maybe they have specific needs and if we could have a communication or linkage between it would make the program more efficient.
Awesome. So talk a little bit about the rotation part. In baseball, we're either swinging or throwing to one side all the time. Right. So can you talk a little bit about why it's important to balance out that other side? Because a lot of kids and athletes in general don't understand that this repetitive movement, turning one way without balancing the other side, it's really a recipe for disaster. So can you talk a little bit about why the balance is important?
Yeah, there's definitely multiple parts. So you're probably never going to get to 50-50 where it's completely even. So in a perfect world, we would get there, but probably ideally we're going to get to 60-40. But for a baseball athlete, per se, they're going to use that one side a lot more. So they're probably maybe 65 or 70% using that, and then the other side's getting underutilized. So obviously on the strength side, you'd want to build that other side so that they can withstand it, working on core in a sense to get them strong there, because everything comes from there. Getting them to learn how to kind of move from their spine, where all movement comes from, or getting their rib cage to come down. Those aren't easy concepts for them to get, but over time, if they could grasp some of these smaller concepts, their movement patterns could be more efficient and more effective versus them just aimlessly just kind of moving and then seeing where these tight areas are or where they're under over rotating and try to work through those differences to try to, like you said, kind of balance it out or get them a little closer to equilibrium in a perfect world.
Yeah, very nice. Do you have an example of a guy that, you first saw that was very one-sided and started working with you a little bit and you got him somewhat equaled out? What does that do to his overall performance?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the guys that are that are really tight, they, like you said, like in a baseball guy that can't rotate as much and gets really tight, they can't swing all the way through. So they can't generate enough force or enough power to get to sort of that optimal range. So maybe they can't extend their arms, they can't get to full extension, they can't get to full rotation. So it's just limiting their movement. So if they can get to a better range or a better sort of, hard to say protocol, but do a better movement efficiency. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
They're able to get to a greater level of performance on the field, because now they're able to move fluid, they're able to move better, and they're able to move without pain. And ideally, they've kind of strengthened that joint, or they have better control of it, because sometimes it's not just flexibility. Sometimes it's learning how to move in that joint, and they can understand how that works sort of on a neuromuscular scale, but on a smaller scale, a micro scale. They have better control of that, and they have better control of how their movements are on the field. And that might not happen overnight. It depends on how often you're working with the team or an athlete to get them to that point. But it just depends on each individual athlete. Certain athletes respond to one thing, and then other athletes respond better to other options.
Right. And when a guy comes to you and he's hurt, maybe it's a repetitive type of injury, and it's one of those things where it hurts, so they just say, go rest a little bit, and he goes right back at it, but doesn't change anything. Can you talk a little bit about what that conversation is like? Because you see it all the time. At least we do in baseball. The kid's arm hurts, take a couple weeks off, doesn't do anything different. All of a sudden, he comes back, his arm feels great, and then all of a sudden, his arm hurts again. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about why that's important? I mean, pain means something. It also means that you need to do something. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about what this conversation's like?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes rest isn't always the answer, because then you just come back to the same pattern. So rest is a short temporary fix, but it's not a long-term solution. Just like they say now, or the studies are out, that kids shouldn't start specializing at such young ages, because then you get stuck in this pattern that might not be appropriate. You're not using, like you said, you're more dominant on one side versus the other, and it just leads to an injury over time. So the conversation is, how do we get to a better place? And that's not always an easy conversation.
Right.
How do we do the work that's going to get you there? And yes, some of it might involve some work in the weight room where it's strengthening along those lines, but some of it's going to be, hey, you're going to have to foam roll 20 minutes a day. Hey, you're going to have to use a lacrosse ball and work on your hip flexors and just work through these tight, intense areas and get better at tissue quality. Or, hey, it's going to be, maybe you need to do 5-10 minutes of yoga, work on some breathing or meditate, and just kind of get yourself to a more freer flowing state versus a kind of tighter, kind of jagged edge, So sometimes it's just finding that balance for them, and each athlete might be different. It's a younger athlete, it might involve a parent conversation, so it's just a mixture. Each one's a different case, but trying to direct them in the right place so that we could ideally mitigate their injuries, get them playing at a higher level for a longer period of time, in a sense.
Yeah, I agree. And you said something, talk a little bit about the time frame, because kids come to you and say XYZ hurts, and you can see that with his movement pattern. It's not sexy at all, but the question is always, right, how long is this going to take? And it's not always an easy answer, because everybody's different. But you never really, but also you never really get there, because it's one of those things where you're constantly working to get there. And there are times when it feels like you're kind of taking a step back. So can you talk about that a little bit, the time frame?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because the time frame is always a challenge. How much time are they dedicating to that sport? So how many hours are they spending, and how many extra hours or how much extra time are they going to do it? So anything with consistency will get better. So if I were to see them once a week, we're not going to make great progress. If
Right.
I see them twice a week, we can make better progress. See them 3 times a week, even better progress. But then it's sort of a continuum where they're going to have to do 5-10 minutes of this work, or maybe even 20 minutes or more, depending on what needs to be done to balance it out, to get to this more pliable, quote unquote, state, So it varies how much time they're going to put in
Right.
to do like you said, the non-sexy work, or the joint type of movement stuff, or the non-loading type of work. And they could see some benefits in several weeks, depending on how much they're doing it. After months, they'll see greater increases. And then the more consistent they do it, and the more they get on a regular program, the greater place they'll be at. So maybe they go to the weight room 4 or 5 times a week, and then they add this into their dynamic warm-up or their cool-down for 5-10 minutes. So they're getting some of it there. So it's not just jumping into a strenuous or stressful situation, adding more stress onto their body. They're actually limbering a bit, or they're adding some more pliability work in. So it depends on how dedicated they are to work on it. Like you said, that conversation is important, and then getting them to see the benefits. So it's not going to be as quick. Whereas in a strength room, you can go work, you can make great progress, and you could add on more weight. So it's a numbers thing. But how do I say, yeah, you've gotten more mobile, you're moving better? It's a feel thing sometimes, less pain, like you said. Receptors are different. So each case is a little different, but it could go from several weeks to several months based on the case. Now, if you get an athlete at a later stage, say you get a younger athlete, their pattern hasn't been moving for as long. So you have a greater chance of changing it. Right. Whereas if you get an athlete later, it's harder to change that pattern. So we could do some preventive maintenance to get them to a better place. So it could just be readjusting their hips per se that gets them back in alignment,
Right.
Which could be a simple fix, but with myself or someone or an athletic trainer, or it could be more detailed work that's involved.
Yeah, for the people that are listening, you got to think of it as the time that it takes to develop the swing. It requires consistency, and how much you do on your own, it's going to help with the time frame and the consistency. So this is the same concept with the recovery and the mobility work. The consistency and how much you do on your own part played the big role. So I like when you said that.
Yeah, I like to say, let's start and get them on a consistent program. What's it going to take them? About 20 days or maybe 30 days to get pretty consistent. So if they could start at a minimum doing 5 to 10 minutes, then we could start building something on that. Whereas if I say, okay, do this for an hour every day, that's going to be a challenge. But if I give them 3 things to do or 5 things to do and say, hey, do this for 1 minute per side, that's 2 minutes. Do these 3 things, that's 6 minutes. I think you can master that. So start with that. And then if you could show me that you're doing those, I'll see when we're doing the work, like in a few weeks later, if things are feeling better and the joint's moving better, correct? Then I'll know you're making that progress and I can give you more. Whereas if I just see you once a week or twice a week and we're making small progress, but the progress isn't as great, I'll know that you haven't been doing the work on the side. And that's the hard part, right?
Yeah, that the whole saying of a little, a lot, not a lot, a little, so it's better to do a little bit every single day than it is to do it in one day for an hour.
Right. Yeah, ideally we'd love to get them to maybe half an hour of doing some of this work daily. But if I give them too much, then it's harder for them to find that block of time.
Something that's becoming more mainstream and more talked about is the breathing part. And this is something that I'm trying to learn more about as well. So can you kind of talk a little bit about the breathing and why it's important? Yeah,
very important because it's we want to get them into sort of a flow state, right? Everybody wants to play in this zone, right? And that's always talked about as, like you said, as a word thrown out there. We got to play how do we get to play in the zone? Well, zone is sort of just less conscious thought. So the more thought you involve and the more time your mind's kind of racing, the less you go on autopilot. Your body could do it on autopilot once it's done enough times, And that's sort of the zone where it's an unconscious, hey, I'm not thinking about walking downstairs and how my knee moves. Actually, it just moves automatically. When I add thought into that and I say, my knee has to do this or do that when I walk, you're probably going to fall or trip down the stairs because now you're involved more thought into it. So part of it would be doing a meditation practice where you're just breathing, and basic could be spending 5 minutes. Say we'll start. All right, 5 minutes. We're going to inhale. We're going to count 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. There could be a pause, and then it would be exhale 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. So now I'm using the words of 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000 to kind of distract their mind so other thoughts aren't coming in. And if they do come in, they're not getting attached to them. And if they could develop this practice where they're just breathing aware they're breathing, that'll keep them in the present moment where they're be where your feet are. I like to use that word. So when we get them to be where their feet are and be in that moment, it's sort of like next play. They don't get wrapped up in the current play that happened. They don't get stuck on that, and they're able to move forward. So it's the same thing, a repetitive practice of spending some time being aware of, are the thoughts directing you, or you directing the thoughts? Are you able to filter out? And how do you get to a quote unquote better place?
Yeah, man, I love it. I think the key to that, because I've tried both ways, the key to the meditation part is that you got to count through the breath. You can't just breathe in and breathe out without trying to distract a thought or not be present, because the mind is going to wander. So for the people that are listening, if you're going to try the meditation part, you need to count your breath.
Yeah, that's so important, because I think the average person, if my numbers are right, has about 50 to 60,000 thoughts a day.
Right.
So if you take that into account, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And while you're just trying to sit there, what's happening? Those thoughts are coming in, right? In and out.
Right.
So like you said, and we discussed, if we're able to count, it could just be 1, 2, 3, then out 1, 2, 3. I'm able to focus on the breathing of the inhale and exhale. And now my mind has something else to do versus to focus on all these thoughts that are coming in and out. So if you break that down, that's a new thought about every 7 or 8 seconds that comes in.
Yeah, I know it. So can you talk a little bit about, this is something that you can do prior to walking up the plate to hit or prior to throwing a pitch. So it's not really the long, drawn-out thing. Yep. But can you kind of talk about some different scenarios? Is it enough to, 1, 2, 3, breathe in and out?
Yeah, it could be something where, like you said, it could be a thing where you do it every day, where it's 5-10 minutes a day, and you could build that to 10-20 minutes, depending on the person. And very successful people do meditate on a daily basis. But so if they were just to take a couple breaths before they go to the plate, it would get them sort of refocused to be in their body and be present. So it could be take a breath, stop. So I like to use the ABC kind of method. So the acronym of adversity, belief, consequence, right? So adversity would be, all right, I got up to the plate, I swung, and I missed. The belief is probably negative, right? I missed the pitch, I'm not going to get a hit. And then what's the consequence? They strike out, right? So the adversity comes, I swing, I don't hit it. What's the belief? I'm going to have a great swing. Maybe I take a breath here, I step out of the box, refocus back in, see the ball better. Now the consequence is it's not negative. I'm going to get a better swing. This is going to be my best swing. I'm going to get a hit versus I'm stuck in this negative train of thought that took me to the negative consequence and went back to the dugout. I struck out. How do I reverse that? Yeah. So it's in that middle part, that belief there, of changing that sort of thought pattern in a sense of, hey, did you see that great swing I had, even though it was a strike? Hey, I'm going to get a hit, or just almost that positive thought provoking in a sense.
Yeah.
Or going up to the plate, hey, today I'm going to see the ball well. I'm going to have great swings. The subconscious doesn't know the difference between the conscious and subconscious. So you could repeat it 100 times. And when you get up there, your body would know, hey, I'm going to get a hit. That's what I've told myself. Not saying what I've told myself, but you're almost able to override the system and create this positive mainframe and a way to be more present and more focused at that moment versus just going into this repetitive thought pattern that led you to this negative consequence. Hopefully that wasn't too drawn out.
No, I love it, and for the people that are listening, that can be practice. When you're sitting in the room meditating, you can practice that at bat. You can practice that pitch or shooting that hoop or whatever it is. It can be practiced while you're doing that, which is crazy, but really, I'm not even standing in the box and I can practice how I'm going to respond and be present.
Right, because if by doing the visualization, it prepares you better for the stressful situation. Get to the stressful situation, you're prepared better. So you're able to handle that situation better. Just like you're going to go talk at a public speaking, and you're not good at public speaking, you're going to have 500 people in front of you. You want to get some friends out that you're going to do a talk to so that you can prepare yourself of, I'm going to be in front of people, I'm going to see eyes. So same thing here. You can practice, hey, how real could I make this visualization? So when I get to the game, it doesn't seem so surreal that the stressors start kicking in and I'm not able to perform.
Awesome. I love it. Let's go back and talk a little bit about sleeping pattern. Young kids and players that are traveling across the country, they are pretty inconsistent with what time they go to bed and what time they wake up. And this can have an effect on their sleeping pattern. So can you talk a little bit about that and why it's important to have a consistent sleeping pattern? Not only, the number of hours, but being consistent with what time you go to bed and what time you wake up.
Yeah, because during sleep, you go through a certain number of sort of REM cycles that you want to get through that run about 90 seconds each. So if you can get through about 4 of those at a consistent pace, that would get you about 6 hours. So like you said, the number might be 6 to 8, 7 to 9. It varies per person, right? But if you can get to this set schedule, your body needs that time of almost shut off where the system could sort of reboot. I like to use it as, so that then you feel rejuvenated, refreshed. But you're right, you want to keep that pattern the same. So you want to go to bed 9, 10 o'clock, wake up the same time, 5, 6 o'clock, because then the body will get into same thing, consistency, routine of I need this amount of sleep at this time. Whereas if you throw the pattern off and you go to bed at 12 one night, you go to bed 8 one night, you go to bed 2 in the morning one night, the body gets all thrown out of place. And if you don't get to bed early enough, these systems don't start working in sequence, or the REM sleep doesn't start kicking in. And then you also get sort of a nervous system response, neurological response, where things are sort of refreshing, re-stimulating again, and allowing your body to perform at that high level, energized, ready to go. They've also done some studies where people that get less sleep or get less fragmented sleep, just as we were speaking about the visualization, the people that go to sleep and say, hey, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to feel energized, refreshed, ready to go, whether they get 4 hours or 10 hours, still feel refreshed because the mind gave them that sensation. But the body still has to catch up to those number of hours over time, and on a consistent basis, it'll sort of catch up to you like sleep debt. It just, over time, all right, I got 4 hours, I got 3 hours, I got 6. So what's the average? Maybe 5, 5.5. How do I get to 7, 8? I got to keep accumulating these hours, just like anything else you're doing in practice, to be more well rested, to be more alert, to be more effective, and be more efficient.
Nice. That's interesting. So how does a guy who's traveling across the country to play a game, how does he work on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge because the circadian rhythm gets thrown off. So now you're on this circadian rhythm that's your normal schedule. So you go 1 hour, you go 2 hours, you go 3 hours. That's throwing off that rhythm now. So one of the things would be still try to get on the same schedule. So even if you're an hour, a half hour behind, I regularly go to bed at 9, I wake up at 6, that would be your schedule still.
Yeah.
Even you don't want the hour to throw you off. So you can do a lot of things too to get to sleep. So being away from your phone for time, because the light and the stimulation is going to enhance your nervous system and your body to say, I'm still awake. So maybe putting your phone on darker mode so you could do that. Making sure the lights are out, making sure it's comfortable so that you're able to get those hours of sleep. And then if you're struggling and you can only get 5 hours, maybe take a 20-minute nap, maybe take a 90-minute nap. Find somewhere that you can get those hours in so that you feel refreshed, ready to go at your highest level. So if you only got 5 and that's all you could get, so be it. You can't change it, but you can get a 90-minute nap. You can get a 20-minute. I like to recommend 20 because then you don't get into full REM, because once you get past 20, you're going to wake up really kind of groggy, because then you're in your REM sleep pattern, and that's almost more of a deep sleep, and it's harder to wake up from that stage. So I'd recommend doing 20, 25 minutes, like maybe set a timer 25 minutes and take you a little while to go to sleep. 20 minutes, quick power nap, refresh, ready to go. If you have longer time, set it for 90. You can get the whole REM cycle in that one cycle, and you'll be awake. You could do things as maybe have some caffeine before you take a nap, because then that stimulant will kick in when you wake up 30 minutes, 90 minutes later, so that you don't feel as groggy. So there's kind of ways not to trick the system, but to add on to it so that you can enhance the performance when you're out on the field.
Nice. That's interesting. So what about nutrition? This is a big part of the recovery process. And obviously, again, the non-sexy stuff. But can you talk a little bit about, some of the best practices for after the game and stuff like that, nutrition-wise?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Nutrition is so important. That's one of the pieces, just like we've been talking about the recovery, the mobility, we're talking about sleep, we're talking about the mental part. It's all part of this whole holistic approach, right?
Right.
So I look at it as a chain link fence. If pieces of the fence are missing, you're not going to get to the full circle, and you're not going to get to optimal performance. So how do we get to it? If the scale is 1 the lowest, 10 the highest, how do we get to 10 on each one so we can get to the highest level? So nutrition plays its part. Are you eating a balanced diet? Are you just eating fried food? Are you eating stuff that's not energizing you for the activity? Are you hydrating enough? That's super important. So if we look at hydration as a number, usually in general, people that are athletes eat pretty well because they're conscious of that.
Right.
But they don't drink enough fluid to maintain that. So usually if you get tired, it's usually you didn't drink enough fluid. So I like to use it as a body weight number. So say you weigh 200 pounds, you need to drink half of your body weight in ounces to just get to equilibrium. So if you weigh 200 pounds, you need to drink 100 ounces of water. Now that's a lot of water.
Right.
That's a gallon and a half. So getting kids or athletes to drink enough water to hydrate throughout the day, not just drinking 100 ounces
right.
in the beginning, it's,
right.
There's a lot of apps and there's a lot of trackers out there. Continue having a water bottle with you. Continue drinking. All right, I drank one of these. That's 16 ounces or 20 ounces. All right, I got to drink 3 more of these throughout the day so that when you get to the event, you don't feel like you're going to fall over. You're tired. You're not hydrated. And then while you're at the event, you're going to want to, every 15, 20 minutes per se, having more fluid to replenish.
Yeah.
So that's a super important part. I mean, beforehand, you want to have something with carbs because you're going to be energizing. So you could still have some protein, but you don't want to have anything too heavy. As you get closer to the event, sort of the more you want to kind of tailor down and having less food because the body's going to take time to digest it. So it could be more liquid, whether it's a protein or some type of shake that's easier digestible. Because you don't want something that's going to give you gastro issues or something while you're playing, that makes it uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So you want to have a good meal, maybe hour or two before, and then as you're coming closer to it, you want to sort of have less, so that your body can actually process that, and then you're able to perform. And like you said, afterwards, you want to have a good amount of protein, but you also need carbs because you lost all that energy. So same thing, best quality protein are going to be animal based. So it's going to be chicken, beef, fish, along those senses, and then some type of carb to replenish within the first hour or two after that activity, and maybe even at a quicker point. So you want to get the protein in quicker, maybe 20 grams. So it's also looking at the labels, looking at the nutrients, and eating this balanced diet that's going to fuel you throughout the day, and then to get you to optimum performance during the day.
Very nice. And you said a couple things that I want to ask about. But so if I'm listening to this, and say I'm a young kid and I'm listening to this, and he's saying, oh, the hydrating part, that's so easy. I can just have, 100 ounces of Gatorade. It's not that hard to do. So can you talk a little bit about maybe not really, what you're talking about?
Well, I mean, it's, in a sense, you don't want to do the 100 ounces of full Gatorade, because Gatorade has salt, sodium, electrolytes, and that needs to be replaced. But you need just regular fluid, which would be water, and then some part the Gatorade. Now they make them with no calories, so it's a little healthier, but we don't need 100, like you said. It's just a certain amount. It's a certain amount maybe leading up to give you some more electrolytes. And then during or after, it's good to have it, because as you're sweating, you're losing the salt. So you need to replace that salt and the sodium, and that you'll find in the Gatorade. So it's a great tool to have some before the event, during the event, and some after. So maybe 16, 32 ounces, depending on how sweaty you are, how much you're hydrated, along those lines, how you feel, are you energized, are you tired, you might need to take in more, but maybe it's a third of that would be a Gatorade or electrolyte substance versus the whole amount.
Nice. And what about someone that says, man, I take 3 Monster Energy drinks before every game, because, that happens. That happens.
Hey, if that gets you energized, that's a tool.
Yeah.
But it's just maybe he's not getting enough nutrients in throughout the day, so he doesn't feel energized. He's not drinking enough fluid, so he's not hydrated, so he needs something else to be energized. So yes, I wouldn't recommend 3. One might be fine, but you also want to check and make sure that these ingredients aren't on the banned substance list, because even though it's sold over the counter, doesn't mean that it's legal for the sport you're playing. And if you get to the higher levels and they test, that could add all different types of parameters to it,
Yeah. Let's go back to the actual stretching and the mobility work.
Yep.
What's the best time to do this work during practice, and what's the best time to do it on game days, and what does it look like before a game versus after the game?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's always good to do some type of movement or exercise first thing in the morning. I always just like to do something that's, whether it's yoga based or some movement thing, and maybe it's 10 minutes in the morning, because I feel like that just gets the body moving, it gets the joints moving, and it gets you going throughout the day, and it sets the tone for the day. You could do it at night, where you want to do maybe a slower pace, where it's kind of relaxing, where it's going to bring your heart rate down and help you sleep. So those are two good bookends. You early in the morning or end of night, where maybe in the morning you need a little faster, a little more energizing. Maybe end of day you need a little slower, just to take you down, to get you ready for that sleep mode. Now the bookend for the game would be, before the game you want to do dynamic, that are movements that are sort of repetitive or similar to the game that you're doing. So they're going to be dynamic. So that's going to be some type of stretching while you're moving, getting the nervous system fired up, getting you ready to perform. That could just be building up running, from running at 10% to 50% to 75% to 100. It could be a quick example, or just any type of dynamic stretch that you're doing in a pattern where you're moving, that'll simulate the pattern of what you're doing on the field. So that you'd want to do in the beginning. And a lot of teams, if you look at the college pro level, and even some at the high school are getting better, are doing this dynamic movement in the beginning. If they do static in the beginning, it sort of shuts your nervous system down, like we said, and slows you down. And then your nervous system isn't turned on enough to get ready to play. And it could cause for greater chance of injury because you're not fully ready. The end of the game is where you want to do that few minutes of kind of static work to kind of cool back down, make the muscle back pliable again, let the blood flow come back in, let the recovery process start, and enhance that by doing a bit of the slower static part at the end. And it could just be as easy as throwing your legs up the wall and let the fluids rush back down. And that would be a quick benefit there. So that then they could actually get to they can recover faster. Yeah. So that when they get to the next practice or the next game, they're not on overdrive.
Right. So what's your thoughts on heat versus ice and even the Mark Pro?
Yeah. I mean, they all have a purpose and sort of a place in the need. Like, there's definitely a use for heat, ice, stim, like you said, the Mark Pro things. I like something like that, the stim, where you're getting the nervous system kind of fired up. I like using sort of like balance disc on air that people are using to just get the nervous system fired up at a greater level. So I find those effective. Like heat's a good tool to kind of also generate heat and get the nervous system turned on. And then ice is usually just for sort of an injury or inflammation to bring it down. So it kind of varies, but I do like the tool of like the stim that's turning the muscles on, which you want to do for your activity versus cooling it down and kind of shutting it down. Now, a cold sensation can give you a stimulating effect. So if you were to take a cold shower for a few minutes, it would make you more alert, more awake, right? Versus just putting ice on that's just in a static position that's sort of slowing you down. Heat's going to generate more neuromuscular sensation and getting you kind of ready to go. So that's just a quick, dirty take, but there's a lot of science behind it, and everybody follows sort of their protocol. So it's sort of what's your system that works for you, and it might be different per person. It might be different per team. It might be different. You might go to one team and another team does it completely different. So what's their system and philosophy that works? Yeah.
So let me ask you this, can you talk a little bit about, and this can be to the everyday person as well, but can you talk a little bit about stress and not unplugging and what that does to your recovery and your performance and all that stuff?
Yeah, stress is a very good term because there's good stress, there's bad stress, and you need a mixture of both throughout the day. But the key with stress is your body doesn't know the difference between the stressors. Stress gets added on. So stress could be, I had an argument with somebody, stress could be, I had a long practice, stress could be, I have a test coming up. But the difference is those are three different stressors, but the body just sees it as stress. So it just adds on and accumulates. So it can't really differentiate and say this stress goes to that area, that stress goes there, this one goes there. It's just, here it is, we're accumulating, now we're getting to critical mass. And everybody's level is going to be different based on their buildup or their makeup, right? But if those stressors get too high, inflammation gets higher, and there's performance, quote unquote, would go down because there's just too much stressor on the body. The body can't perform at the highest level because there's too much of it. And that's where the breathing, the meditating, the positive affirmation, the visualizations come in. That's where maybe it's okay sometimes you need a day off, or hey, I need to get a little more sleep. My body's listening to your body that it's it's allowing everything to come back down to a lower state. Maybe you don't get to equilibrium, but we bring it down a bit so that then when the stressors come, they don't get to the highest and you're overexcited. And then it's just, you're so overexcited that you're overthinking it. And then the unconscious isn't able to perform, right? So you don't get to sort of the zone, right? Because now you're just so overthinking it, overanalyzing it. Yeah. So many stressors are coming in that you're not on autopilot now. Like when people say you have an out-of-body experience, it's almost like you're so unconscious, which is the word unconscious. You're just flowing. You're not even thinking about it. Yeah. When the stressors come in, you're overanalyzing. It could be same thing. You're going to take a test. Hey, unconscious is same thing. You'd be in the zone. Hey, you see the answer? That's it. But then you sit there and you overanalyze. Oh, maybe it's this one. That falls into that. Now you've spent so much time overanalyzing it, you can't get to the right answer, right?
Right. Yeah, I like how you explained that. I love when you said, hold on, I wrote it down. When you said it's okay, and I fall into the pattern myself. You know, I'm busy during the week. I'm working hard, and I'm super tired. And for me, I've got a routine, but it's okay to get that extra sleep if it needs it, if you need it. It's that whole listening to your body part. And it's important, and it's something that I'm working on for sure. But I love when you said that, because it's true, and it's okay, and it's not the end of the world if I get that extra 30 minutes of sleep.
Right. Yeah, it's valuable to listen to your body, and that's a hard thing for most people, because the whether it's masculine or feminine, it's just always to grind or push or get to that next level, right? Sometimes that next level, just you keep push, and then you go over the edge, and then it's a crash, and it's hard to get back up there.
Yeah.
So you want to stay in this kind of sweet spot. So it's hard for people to feel like, hey, this hurts, or that's bothering me. What do I do to resolve it? What are the things I need to do? The general inclination is just keep going. Hey, I've got 4 hours of sleep for the past 6 months. I've been good, but now I'm not feeling as well. I'm kind of feeling sick. I'm feeling broken down. But they don't think of it that way. They just think I've done it, and it's okay.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes getting that feel of, hey, this isn't right. This is out of balance. What's that balance for you? What's that sweet spot? And it's a challenge to actually feel is the word that I like to use. Of, like you said, it's, hey, maybe I need this extra half hour, or hey, I didn't get this enough sleep, but maybe I did something recovery wise. I went to a cryo chamber and that kind of enhanced how I feel. Or maybe I went and did one of the float tanks where I floated, and sort of like meditation, I floated in the water. It calmed me down. Maybe I even took a nap or snooze, and that felt good. So what are those things I did to help me get back to a closer to equilibrium, so that I'm able to stay in this flow state or smoother state or middle ground versus too high, too low, because too low could be bad, too high could be bad.
Yeah, the whole go, it builds up, and emotionally, the stress and everything that's involved, and it turns into a lot of different things. The body builds that stuff up, and if you don't unplug and you don't release, then it can lead to a whole worm of things that, can do harm to your body.
Yeah, even just, you can end up getting more sick. You can end up getting injured more. You're just less alert. Like if you're not getting enough sleep, we'll just use that example. Yep. So they've done studies where people that have gotten less sleep are just less alert, less focused, less able to focus, and just not able to perform at that highest level. So less alert would be slower reaction time. And the body's it didn't get that right amount of sleep or good sleep. And then you just meander throughout the day on this kind of gyrating up and down, So there's so many consequences that people don't either feel the consequences or don't act on them, and just keep going and say that this is normal.
Yeah, Jason, man, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but
this
has been a great conversation. I love the holistic approach that you take. You just shared a lot of great stuff with us. So let's just kind of wrap this up with telling us, if I want to have Jason come look at my team or come work with us, tell us a little bit about, where I can find you. You're in the Jersey area, right?
New York area, right outside of New York, so Connecticut.
So you're up that way, So what's your website and how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, definitely. My website is my name, so it's Jason, Jason, and my last name, all one word, Papalio, Papalio. So it's all there. Most of my contact info is there. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, the social media channels, or Twitter. But Instagram, Facebook, I have a page there, so it's just my name too, Jason Papalio. So I try to keep it all the same. Okay. It's a good way to reach out to me. Usually it's a lot of word of mouth where I work with one team and then other teams are interested. Sometimes I'll target or I'll reach out directly to whether it's a strength coach or athletic trainer or a coach that might be interested or that I feel would be benefit. Try to show them here's XYZ of why we should do this, not just we're doing it.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's a one-page proposal of here's the benefits. Or maybe it's just a quick conversation we meet. Or it could be, hey, you don't know what this is, but you're interested and you heard it works. Maybe it's a half an hour demo. And maybe they need to feel it, like we discussed, and see how their body responds or was it effective for them. And so it could be multiple different tools of working with athletes. And sometimes people find me or I find them. Various avenues.
Awesome, man. And for the people that are listening, man, this conversation was golden. The recovery part, like we alluded to throughout the conversation, is not sexy, but it's so critical because, especially, everything that we touched on in this conversation. So, Jason, I appreciate you coming on, man.
No, thanks for having me, and appreciate the time.
I'm Geoff Rottmayer. Thank you for listening to our conversation on the Baseball Awakening podcast. Stay tuned for our recap show tomorrow.